Afternoon, Peoples of Friction Log. This is Kincy Clark once again. Today, I'm joined by our unbreakable and always producing Friction Log founder, Rick Blaylock. Rick, how are you doing today?
Doing great, man. Good to see you again. Beautiful day in Florida as always. You got to come visit me.
Yeah, you should come visit our cold, dreary day that we're having here in Davis, California, in Northern Cal, getting inundated with water, which we need. So that's not a bad thing. I'm not complaining.
Yeah, that's good. I will come visit you at the end of June during the AI World Fair. That's when I come visit.
Okay.
So hopefully it's nice.
Well, it will only be about 100 degrees then. So it's a great time. 80s, 90s, the occasional hundreds. June's not bad. June's a good time to come here. Anyway, I know people are not wanting to hear about weather patterns in Northern California. They're much more interested in what we're going to talk today, which is bringing it back to product development and talking about a topic that's near and dear to product people, engineering managers, and perhaps most importantly, talent recruiters. And the topic is full stack development. So we're going to break down the concept, what it means, what are some of the trials and tribulations of full stack development from a product leader perspective, but also as a practitioner. Are full stack developers worth their weight in terabytes, or should we be RM-FRing them in that whole concept in the year 2024? But first, a word from our sponsor, G2I.
I'd like to talk to you about our sponsor on Friction Log, G2I. I really, really like these folks. G2I is a hiring community that connects freelance developers with remote engineering teams. And the approach, I think, is really unique. They make solid technical assessments. They really vet their folks a lot. They do meetings with them all the time. And they mix that solid technical assessment with a real commitment to their developer health. So that means that companies get the best without a lot of the guesswork if this person is okay or not. Skilled developers who are supported, valued, not burnt out, and ready to execute from day one. So check them out, G2I. There'll be a link in the show notes.
Okay, to kick things off, let's get a definition of full stack development. Rick, how would you define a full stack developer?
So I would define, there's different definitions. I would define a full stack developer as someone who is flexible enough to work on front end applications. That's applications that the customer or some end user is interacting with, as well as the back end, which includes APIs and data. That's how I would classify it. There's other layers to that as well. AI, different layers in AI. There's even different layers in data. But in general, if you're building an application, you're thinking of APIs and data as back end. And then the front end is the user interface and the things that the customer is using.
Okay. So I Googled this and I looked, full stack developer is a web design professional who creates back-end, front-end, and mobile website elements for their customers. Back-end development includes creating a website's digital framework, including site coding, digital storage, database synchronization, web connectivity. Front-end development includes producing a website's visual style, page layout, content, and graphical features, mobile, blah, blah, blah. So that's what Indeed had to say. I asked ChatGPT too, and I said, please provide a crisp and simple definition. And it said, a full stack developer is a programmer who has expertise in both front end, client side, and back end, parentheses, server side development, allowing them to work on all aspects of a web application or software project. Any thoughts on those definitions? I mean, they sound similar to yours.
So the good news is ChatGPT and I'm closer to AI than I am Indeed. So maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. That's roundabout what I said it was. So that's right. Indeed sounded like it was a little heavy on web design. And generally, I don't think of web design as like I'm a web designer. I wouldn't assume that person's a full stack developer when they said I'm a web designer.
So that's an interesting question. Do you think having design chops is part of full stack development?
Not necessarily. And we'll get into this. There's different tiers and layers to it. Like I definitely know some people that are amazing at design that are full stack. So there is an element of that, but you don't necessarily need to be a good designer to be a full stack person.
But I guess my question is, do you need to have some design elements? I mean, you don't need to be like, Jonathan Ivey, but maybe do you need to have some design instincts or do you?
If you're building, again, there's exceptions, but like in general, you're in a company and you need to work on the front end, the back end. you're going to have to deal with CSS and implementing a design and stuff like that. And if you don't have any design sense, even just implementing a design that a designer built, it's going to be rough. Like you have to have some design sense where you're taking a pre-existing design and implementing it, you know?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, we'll get into this because I think that's part of the promise of a full stack developer too, is that, again, they're generalists in a sense. So before we start hitting on that though, and talking about the previously promised trials and tribulations, let's talk about the alternative. What's the opposite of, what's the bizarro world full stack developer look like?
So the opposite of full stack development would be bespoke role. So someone who just works in like the design. I only do CSS and I implement the look and feel and nothing else. And then you might even have on the front end someone I'm a front end engineer that does a lot more of the deeper technical stuff, but I don't do the APIs. And then there's like this line, and then we have back end engineers, and then they work on those things. And then even there's layers, right? Because there might be the guy that's interaction tier APIs and edge network APIs and those kind of things. But then there's like data engineers, and then after that there might be some AI engineers, and then there's all sorts of different facets to it. But
so specialists.
Yeah, specialist is a good way to say it. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this just feels like classic tension between generalists and specialists. I think we'll get more into that. But, these concepts are not just found in, development. Some of the things, something you said just reminded me of some friction that the Army often has with the Air Force. And I'm sure the Air Force has with the Army, where the Army is definitely a specialist organization. And, they have people who only do very specific things, and that's all they do. And they will oftentimes refuse to do anything else, which can be super frustrating if you're an Army generalist guy and you're just like, big mission, it doesn't matter, we got to get it done. So maybe Army's like the full stack developers of the military, and Air Force are the opposite of them. I don't know. This is an interesting thing to explore. Something you said just made me think about that. Again, I went to our good friend ChatGPT and asked, what is the opposite of full stack development? And I don't know, is it he, she, it told us, the alternative to a full stack developer is typically a specialized developer who focuses on a specific area of software development, blah, 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 blah. So that's the opposite, right? It's a specialist. So, where I like to start is at the beginning, hiring. So let's talk about this from a hiring manager perspective. So now we have some definitions and understanding of the environment. What are some thoughts as someone who would hire a full stack developer versus a specialist? Any thoughts on, would you pay more? Would you pay less? What's your value as someone who would be building a team?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think actually before the hiring, the question is, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to build? What are you trying to accomplish? And there's philosophical things, there's budget things, there's all sorts of stuff, right? So from a product perspective, you can make the product organization perspective, you can make the distinction. Like we have cross-functional product teams. And so those cross-functional product teams, we want to staff them with front-enders, back-enders, whatever else, right? And so that's like the specialist approach. There's reasons why you'd want to do that and the reasons why you wouldn't want to do it. On the other side, there is that, well, we just have product teams and we want our product teams to be full stack. We want them to be as flexible as possible. Usually in those philosophies, you want a smaller team. We don't want 10 people on our team. We want 4 people on our team. And there's a lot of reasons for that and stuff like that. But I think you start with that, and then you get to the recruiting, and then you go, okay, well, now I'm going to recruit for full stack. So in that case, then you're staffing for a product team, and you're looking for people that can do back end and front end. And there's always like this give and take on it, because there's never like this one. There's never every single person on the team is perfectly adept at all the stack. They might be able to jump in and out,
absolutely,
both, and they might be able to do both. But there's some people that are really good on front end, and there's some people that are really good on back end, and they could do both, but they're not going to be as good as the other person is. And so that's good. You want that overlap in the team. It's kind of, if we're going to use military analogies, it's kind of like, some of the special ops teams, they could do each other's jobs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though they might have training and different things, they can do each other's jobs, but maybe they don't always do that, right?
Yeah. No, but again, I think the analogy is apt there because they don't scale super well either. Like their
Right.
superpower is being in that small, highly
Mhm.
communicative team, which is an interesting thing to kind of bring back to your thoughts on team size. I mean, I just took that note. Like you said, if
Mhm.
you have a smaller team, tell me a little. Yeah, I mean, kind of let's explore that a little bit because I think this is a key part of understanding why you want to make some of these decisions around who to hire.
Yeah.
So
So,
team,
yeah, on the team size thing, the nice thing about team size, and we know this organizationally, right? The amount of the smaller amount of people that you have to talk to and keep informed and all that, the less banter, the less out of sync, in sync, the less meetings, the less all that. It's just fast. The faster you can move, the easier you can all kind of be in sync and that kind of thing. It doesn't mean you can get as far from an expertise perspective, but you could get things done fast, just communication wise and stuff. Again, there's different philosophies on why you would want one or the other. Sometimes, like you mentioned the word scale, like it doesn't scale well. You're right. You can't have, a team of 15 times however many teams you have, and then just, oh, we're going to scale to 1,000 or what. It's just at some point you have to narrow down. But in a lot of cases, especially man, in some of these tech companies, do you really need to worry about scale? If you're trying to build this company, you're trying to build this product, you can probably build this product to $1 billion company, and someone is over there going, well, we need to worry about what happens when we scale to 5,000 people. And it's, dude, like you don't, maybe that's the wrong goal.
yeah, yeah. Let's worry about getting to 1,000 successfully and like clearing that. Well, I mean, so, kind of bringing it back to this idea. So I want to, because you gave a pretty specific number, and I know that's an artificial number because you said like 10 versus 4. What I think
Mhm.
I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I thought I heard was 4 full stack developers versus a larger team of specialists. Is that accurate?
Yeah, because you're going to have, so for example, if you're a mobile company or you're mobile and web, for example, you have a web and a mobile product. So you're going to have web developers, Android developers, iOS developers, and then backend developers. And so then there's like the question of, do you have redundancy? Do you have 2 of each? Do you have 3 of each? Or Android's a little harder. So in rougher and hard to get. So maybe you have more Android engineers than you do iOS engineers. So yeah, you're going to have a lot more people if you go the specialist route because of that.
Okay. I mean, I think that's something to put a pin in. I think that's really important to think about when you're thinking about early stage trade offs. I had taken some notes here, and maybe a couple scenarios to explore that may
Hmm.
resonate with people listening to this. So let's say you've launched your MVP, you're starting to get traction. It's a B2C app. We'll just put some color there. I know there's a ton more
Yeah.
details that we needed, but I'll ask the question. Maybe it's you've been working on it with somebody else. Is your first hire in this case a full stack developer, or is it someone more specialized in something that you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, the typical thing is it depends. Can see it depends. And it does. But in general, put my finger in the wind and just kind of see like how's this going. I would assume I would hire a full stack person. Like hiring a specialist that early on, I don't know. That just feels frustrating to me. I'm actually frustrated thinking about that right now. If I just hired,
Well,
like I
let's
just,
explore that.
I only hire like we've got this product and it's getting traction, and I hired this Android dev, and the Android dev goes, nope, I only do Android dev. I'm like, and it's you and me, bro. Like you can't just do Android and I do everything else. I'm just thinking about that in my head, how that goes. I'm like, no, that's not going to work.
Okay, no, I think that's good though. I mean, I think that's a good thing. That's a good takeaway for people to think about because this is not an uncommon situation for people to have, or they've launched something and they're thinking about bringing some new person on the team. And how do you find a good full stack developer? Like, how do you go find that person? How do you know that this person is going to be true to their promise? I was just looking. I'll let you answer that question, then I got kind of some feedback that I just was looking at online.
No, it's interesting. I'm actually can't wait to hear the feedback part. So finding, I mean, obviously there's your network and the people that you know and those kind of things. Full stack folks are usually a lot more independent. They're a lot more they have a lot more agency.
Okay.
because of the type of person it is. Now there's maybe some downsides with that type of personality. I mean, I'm a full stack developer. I have downsides for my things. Like I can get into all the things and then it's, yeah, but we need this one thing right now. It's, yeah, but then we've got to build this thing or whatever. We could talk about some of those pros and cons later. But yeah, I mean, just me personally, I would look in my network and that kind of thing. I feel like, I don't know this for a fact, but I feel like from a recruiter perspective and the industry, there's enough people that understand what this means. When you say it, you don't have to educate the folks you're talking to about it. I could be wrong, but now there's people that will kick back on that. There's a lot of people that are like, I don't believe in full stack. Full stack's ridiculous, blah, 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 blah. That's a whole nother conversation. But I feel like when you talk to recruiters and other people, they'll understand what full stack is for the most part.
Okay. So, what I was looking at online is I was like, well, let's go to LinkedIn and see what a full stack. So I thought this was interesting. Are you a passionate full stack .NET engineer looking to join a dynamic team? Okay. So cue the laugh track on .NET. Got it. Let's get past that. Okay. But so what they're saying here, I'm just gonna read a little bit. No one wants to hear job descriptions, but we're seeking someone with over 4 years of experience in .NET technologies and a knack for cloud platforms, particularly Microsoft Azure. If you thrive on crafting scalable, maintainable, and high performance software solutions, we want you. Bonus points if you've integrated with Salesforce. As a full stack .NET engineer, you'll dive into complex projects, collaborating with cross-functional teams, there's that word, in an agile environment.
I didn't hear anything in there about full stack. I don't understand that.
Yeah.
That's a cloud backend engineer. At least from the description that you read, what is the front end part of that? What's the client side? I didn't hear mobile. I didn't hear web. I didn't hear, I don't know, client side application. I mean, it's .NET. Is it a Microsoft Windows application? I don't know.
So the day-to-day develop scalable, okay, all that nonsense, collaborate closely, all that good stuff. Deploy and manage applications on cloud computing platform. So they do say here, front-end web development experience using technologies such as React.
Okay.
So that's interesting.
All right. Okay. Well, so then that's right. So they do need front end then.
But it's interesting because nothing in that initial job description would have led you to think about that. Like I had to kind of scroll down into this to find out, because there's, again, that first part that I read to you that was like, nothing about this says full stack. I think you're spot on. I don't know. This is why I come back to, I'm not sure if people fully understand this concept.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
I mean, clearly some people do. And, there's a lot of different definitions of this. People are going to be arguing about this forever and a day, but I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. Well, let's take another scenario, Rick. You've got a B2B SaaS company. You've already got a small team of devs. Let's call them a mix of full stack and front end people. Okay. The challenge you have now is you need to enterprise your solution. We can ad nauseum just talk what that means, but let's just call it all the compliance acronyms, security and scalability. You can hire 2 to 3 people. What are you thinking? What kind of specialists are you thinking? Are you thinking specialists? Would you turn that over completely to a full stack team? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, actually, that's a great scenario because in this case, like you're talking enterprise. So you're talking, we need to have on-premise, we need to have like data separation and all these other things, right? And then there's we're
SOC
punching
2,
tunnels.
GPRD.
Yeah. SOC 2, all those things. And we're punching holes into tunnels, into VPNs for someone else and some other customer. And blah, blah, blah. That's really not generally a front end specialty at all. It's more of a back end. And even then I would argue the full stack devs, they're still mostly focused on the application and how it works and stuff for the customer and the product. And enterprise generally tends to those things tend to be more back end security oriented. It's much more of like a back end engineer, cloud engineer, system engineer. It just kind of depends on where you live. But by and large, most full stack folks, when you say, hey, we need to be able to create tunnels into VPCs for customers and then manage those and do this and that, all these enterprise-y type things, by and large, full stack developers are going to go, okay, well, I can learn it. I would love to learn that. That's interesting. But it doesn't mean they're, but it doesn't mean they're an expert in it. And if you're like at the stage of your company where you're like, no, these are like $5 million deals we're signing. We need to we need to make this work
Yeah.
every single time, then I would probably hire specialists for that.
Okay. Would you hire all specialists or would you hire just like one? And then because I mean, there's definitely some techniques where you hire one kind of like pretty hardcore specialist
Mm-hmm.
and then people kind of, you get some coding velocity by other people working with that person, or would you hire like a set of three? How do you balance that? Again, 2 to 3 hires. I mean, again, it's a fake company, so no one's like going to lose their job here.
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends, but I wouldn't hire 3 specialists and 3. You only do compliance and you only do GDPR. And like, I think you could probably find people that work in all of those things, but they should definitely be paired in a product team with people that are implementing this stuff. Because, for example, if it's okay, we're going to do bot detection and bot protection, or we're going to do, some of the VPN stuff or tunneling into the VPCs, all this stuff. Like there's still a front end and a back end component to that where you got to write APIs, and then in your product's UI, you've got to wire that up and let the person configure things and stuff. So they definitely need to be paired with people that are full stack. So if we're looking at this as a whole different product group, then that should be a product team. This is the enterprise, whatever product team.
Oh, that's interesting. So still maintaining that kind of like product focus, but augmenting them with specialists as opposed to letting them create their own teams.
Yeah, probably.
No, I think that's wise. I mean, I think recently I've experienced where that can go a bit sideways, where you bring in some pretty hardcore specialists. I'm looking at you, security, where I think security is really prone to this because there's like this specialized knowledge and there's a lot of compliance and it's perceived as very high risk for, some valid, but I think sometimes it's a little hyped how like important it all is.
Or hidden. They like, no, you can't do that. It's bad.
Totally.
It's like, why? Can you open the can and let us see? No, it's bad. You can't do that. Just trust me.
I'm in security.
I went to this webinar, black hat, white hat, and no, we can't do it. I'm like, why? Teach us.
No, 100%. No, I can't tell you. Like, I was trained in the art of secrecy and I have to maintain that. Okay. That's a whole different episode on security people, but especially security developer types. And I'm sure there's some great ones out there. If you're listening, I'm sure you're amazing, but I've just had a few. And honestly, it's not the people I found. The engineers were never bad. They were always like wanting to help. It was typically the management layer that was all the top secret squirrel people. Anyhow, kind of coming back to the point of, so kind of a mix, but I definitely like this idea of integrating into a team that has like an outcome, because no one buys your product for security purposes. I think that's when you kind of lose the plot a little bit, when you have a team that doesn't really have a direct customer outcome. Like, again, no one buys your product because it's GDPR compliant or it's SOC 2 compliant. They buy it because it does something cool and they need this as part of it. So it feels like that's how you keep those people honest, is by making sure those specialists get integrated into teams. Is that?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, if you're not attached to a product team, that means you're not attached to, like you said, product outcomes, which is customer outcomes and business outcomes. And then you're just kind of aimless. And then you end up building things that, okay, we got this thing, check. And then no one else knows about it. No one else knows why they should sell it, how they should sell it, how they should market it. You have to be attached to a product team, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, again, like otherwise, what are you attached to? And again, I think this is how you create silos pretty quickly. What about thinking about this as a product leader? Who do you like working with? What's been your experiences there? I mean, you've given us some clues on how you kind of think about this problem in terms of org structure, org design, but like the day-to-day of working with a full stack developer versus a specialist. Any thoughts?
I have a strong
techniques?
Now it's because I am this way, but I have a strong bias towards full stack just because I am a full stack person. And I would prefer people to have the flexibility and the freedom to go, oh, that's a problem. Let me go take the initiatives and just do this end to end. Doesn't mean they have to do that every time, but I hate, this is what I hate. I hate silos. I mean, well, everything's a silo, right? And as soon as you create an organization, you create silos. But there's like good silos and bad silos. I don't like the silos where it's, well, I can't do my job. I can't finish this. It's code. Okay. I understand how this works code wise, but I can't do it because there's this line here and he's the backend engineer and I'm waiting for him to write the API. And you probably could write the API. Like it's just go do it.
Yeah. No, so I think this is an interesting question. Something that just kind of I thought about. So I think this is where architecture is really important, because how is your app architectured? How is your product architectured? Is it architectured in such a way to facilitate these types of things? So if you're thinking about an architect, what kind of background are you thinking makes a good architect? It feels like a full stack developer would be that person, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. It needs to be a full stack person, like someone who has to do things end to end and can do it hands on. Because it's one thing, I can read white papers and read blogs and watch videos. And so this is how we're going to do this thing that I've never done before, but because I'm specialized over here, but according to what I've read, or I can draw these pretty diagrams. It's not like you got to have somebody who has some hand-on experience because they know the nitty gritty details and the problems that cross over the different areas, So I think so.
Do you think there's any relationship to kind of like a monorepo, a distributed repository? Do you think that relates into this conversation at all?
That's a really interesting question. Oh man, that's probably a way deeper conversation for another video. But so knee-jerk reaction is, yeah, I think it does a lot. When you have a monorepo, you do have a little bit of a freedom to kind of jump around and see how things are working and that kind of thing and make changes and stuff. So I definitely, as opposed to microservices, I remember one of the VP of engineering at Uber, I can't remember, somebody at Uber, and they're big into microservices. And this was like 2015, 2016, something like that. And I remember him saying at a talk, he said, what's nice about microservices it lets us trade. What did he say? He said, it lets us trade politics for liberty or freedom or something like that. And what his point was, is I've got these guys that are specialists managing these little microservices, and they just manage those, and they can iterate and move as fast as they can on those things. And we don't have to talk to anybody else to do it. We can just do that. Which is interesting. I think a really interesting viewpoint of microservices from organizational perspective. But the reality is what he just described was people that are specialists doing things in this one little silo, which is kind of funny, right? Because when you hear about these big tech companies and it's like, this guy worked four years on this one button. I think that's how this happens. It's like you have the one person that only has ever worked on the like button on Facebook, and that's it.
I thought that was a subtle dig at the Google recent change in their login that they hyped for 6 months. But that was probably a product manager who worked on that, probably not an engineer. But anyway, that was what came to my mind, was like some poor engineer, like, I have to redesign the Google login screen. Like, this could probably take any normal coder like 20 minutes, but it took Google like 6 months.
Right. But you know what, though, also, I will say, like in those examples, because those are extreme examples, right? Those are the outliers.
100%.
They actually use monorepos, but it's such a big organization with thousands of people that monorepo isn't what we're talking about as a monorepo. It's a little different.
Yeah, the scale is huge.
Yeah, the scale's very different.
These are classic tensions. I mean, they're trade-offs, right? There's no right answers. There's only trade-offs.
Right.
Thomas Sowell, famous quote. There's no right answers here. So, do you trade off kind of what this guy was talking about? I don't know. That's an interesting thought, that you kind of like getting more, I guess, the idea of liberty over politics or something like that. But I do feel like the overhead with a ton of microservices is the synchronization you have to do between all the elements.
Mm-hmm.
It's great to have a bunch of people operating independently in their own little bubble, but ultimately they're delivering a unified experience, and someone has to spend an enormous amount of effort, because there's only so far you can go with a microservice. Like you can't outpace your organization too far in front. You guys, like, what are you doing?
Yeah. And you know what, that goes into kind of to bleed over into the product philosophy stuff that you asked about earlier. That's one of the downsides of like fully autonomous teams. Like, autonomous teams are great we want people to have the freedom to do things and do the things they need for the customer. But if that's a religion and it's like, oh, we just need fully autonomous teams. If you've got 10 teams that are little pirate ships going out doing, like freelancers going out doing their own things, it's like, where's the admiral? And we need an armada. We're an armada. Yeah, we're not a bunch of, buccaneers here. So
no, that's a great
kind of
analogy.
thing with the code.
Yeah, no, 100%. You're spot on. Well, and then it kind of comes back to this. I think, bringing it back to full stack developers and all these things, like, who are the real pirates? I mean, I think sometimes, I think if you were to ask someone like who's more piratic, I don't know if that's an adjective or not, but we're going to use it today, a full stack developer specialist. I think what would immediately most people would say is a full stack developer, because, they're used to being able to do all these different things and they got their hands in every types of pot. But I would almost argue like the opposite, like the counterintuitive thing is probably the specialist is, because they live in kind of their own world and they kind of want to do things their way, because again, they're specialized, they're experts, they know what they want. And I think sometimes those personalities can take or can be the one that, is, wait, where are you guys going? We're part of an armada here and we don't need your ship down by the Horn of Africa. We need you up here fighting the Spanish. Okay, if you're a Spaniard, fighting the English, whatever. Use your own war analogy from the 1700s. But yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'm kind of curious your thoughts there, like on autonomy, like who has, I know in my personal experience is that specialists, not always, maybe not even the majority of the time, but I tend to get more friction working with them than I do with people who are more full stack generalist types.
Man, that's such a great point. And you're right. It is counterintuitive because you would assume, because there is the personality of a lot of full stack people like myself, where it's just like, I just do whatever. Blah, blah, blah. And so that does feel like it's on your own. But usually when you're doing whatever, all these things, API and some backend stuff, you're stringing it together for an outcome. You're not just doing it randomly just because you have some discipline or some thing in your mind's like, this is how it should be done. This is the best practice or whatever. It's just because, no, I need to get this done for a customer or whatever. So that's a really interesting, like counterintuitive point. And so I think you're right. Like I'm thinking through some examples of specialists, and yeah, I'm trying to think of an exception. I'm sure there's an exception, but most of the time I'm thinking, oh yeah, gatekeeper.
Yeah. No, gatekeeper. That's a great term too. Yeah. It's a more positive term than I was thinking. Yeah, for sure. There's definitely some gatekeeping. And again, there's some valid reasons for that. It's not bad, right? I mean, these guys do know, or gals, they do know a lot about a lot, like whatever it is that their specialty is. But sometimes that drive for the specialty kind of overcomes the rest. Like sometimes you don't need the perfect, security thing. I love picking on security people.
No, you're totally right.
Perfect. You have to assume some risk there. And they sometimes don't see that. Oh, you don't understand. Well, you'd be surprised to know what I do understand.
I think you're 100% right, because when you're so intimate with something, like down to the expert level, and you're not familiar with the other things that are going on, you haven't like the other parts of the stack. So that every little detail there, every little freckle and imperfection and stuff. So you're like, oh, I've got to fix that. We got to do that. We got to do that. No, we can't do that because this little thing. And it's like, they can't step back and see the full picture and go, dude, doesn't matter. That is a problem. You're totally right.
As a self-proclaimed, self-acknowledged, self-admitted full stack developer, are there some areas in development where you would step very warily, carefully in, and you'd be almost like, I really would like to have some, like a more specialized knowledge, maybe even just help you with it? Are there some areas in development where you just feel like that having some specializations necessary, or do you think everything's on the table for a generalist?
So no, I mean, like we talked about, like that one example you gave was a good example with the enterprise products and getting some of those specialties. At some point, depending on what you're building, there are intimate things performance. If you really, really, really need to get down to the nitty gritty with performance, having some system guys and some backend or just data guys or whatever it is, depending on what it is, that just know that stuff end to end, like just nitty gritty down to, this is how the compiler puts the assembler code and all that stuff. It puts it here instead of here and blah, blah, blah. There are benefits to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's, I would say performance in certain cases. I feel like the Kubernetes side of things, even though full stack devs will deal with Kubernetes, running and managing cloud native applications, there's a lot of Kubernetes things that full stack people just want to build applications. And that's a specialty that
absolutely
gets overlooked, from the full stack. So that's another one. And that actually comes down to performance too, because it's performance on the cloud platform that you're
I'm about to say that exactly. It's very performance related.
AI is another one. Although I'll argue, to quote Swix, Sean, on latent space, like there is this push left. Full stack people are getting pushed into the data and AI world more and more, but there's definitely AI specialties depending on what you need and what you're doing. There's actually this whole new wave of generative AI has enabled full stack people to do a lot of cool stuff without needing AI people and specialists.
Yes.
So there is that. But depending on what you're doing, you might need some specialists on the AI side. But again, like, it's kind of like, maybe not. Maybe in 5 years, you don't need that. You just need the full stack guy.
Well, so actually this we'll ask for funding after this for this podcast, because we're going to talk about generative AI right now. So if you're listening, just throw money our way, because we've introduced AI once again. Do you think AI has changed full stack development? Like, my personal experience as a coder recently has been, it has allowed me to do some things that I just would not have been able to do. Like, I've been using pandas and NumPy and some other stuff that kind of dabbled with, but now I just feel like I have access to experts, and now I can kind of get in and do some things where I probably wouldn't have done some of that before. So I'm curious your thoughts on that. Do you think this has opened the door to make generalists have access to more specialization?
I think so. And to get there faster, because that's always the barrier, right? Like a generalist, generalists usually, because of their personality, like I'm using me as an example, we want to know how things work and get down to the nitty gritty. And I'd love to know, the compiler does this and this is where it ends up and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's not that I don't want to know that. No, that's not my specialty. No, I want to know. It just comes down to time. Where do I put my effort and time? And I think AI, this generative AI stuff, helps you cut that time down to learn those things. It's really, really nice. Especially, so I use Cursor, which is a VS Code fork. And it's kind of you can use Copilot in it. It's VS Code, but they have this other stuff that you can do, and you can pick which model you use, and there's a bunch of cool stuff. But anyway, a lot of times, like, I was dealing with some Go code last week, and I just didn't know. I'm not a Go expert at all. I know a little bit of it, but I'm not an expert. And I just didn't quite understand how this, like, why it was doing this. So I just said, explain to me what's going on here. And it did. And it gave me a general understanding. And then it gave me enough information. And now I can go look it up. And then I go look it up. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that's way faster. Like, that's a few minutes versus, what is this? Let me go read the Go manual. Where's this at? Where do we? It's just so much faster. Right.
20 stacks of books, like, drop shipped. Oh, wait, this isn't 1997. What's interesting though, I think the counterpoint to it is that it's being able to recognize which specialization ChatGPT, generative AI. I'm going to use ChatGPT as the proxy. I do realize it's a large language model, listeners, but we're just going to use ChatGPT as the proxy for AI today. Asking ChatGPT about, you have to really understand, like, when maybe the specialization is too deep or too narrow for ChatGPT to have a good understanding. Because the challenge with generative AI, it's always going to generate an answer. And I'll tell you, put this to the test at a dinner party about a month and a half ago. A buddy of mine came over, and he's into this, I can't remember the language, but these super hardcore firmware stuff that they use for radios, like, not car radios, but like radio transmission technologies for military applications, for industrial applications. So pretty hardcore stuff. And we were talking about AI, and he's like, I'm not worried about it at all. And I was like, okay, well, tell me why, blah, blah, blah. I ended up asking it to write a little program in his super specialized programming language. And needless to say, I could see that it hadn't done a very good job, and he laughed out loud. But I think part of it, there just wasn't enough to train the model on it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it kind of broke. But I think the art is knowing like to double check and recognizing maybe I should go get another source, or maybe there's just not enough stuff here to learn from. And maybe the learning is I need to go get a specialist, because I got to tell you, if I was building a radio, I wouldn't try to learn how to code in that through ChatGPT. I'd call my buddy Jeff and say, dude, we need to build this application. Thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Like kind of on some of the more esoteric things. Have you experienced that?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. 100% right. I mean, there's things like you can, like a cursor, you can point it to a website or docs and say, ingest all this stuff. And then it's context for what you're trying to do. And if you're using code interpreter, it'll figure out stuff, like it'll figure out proprietary binary formats. And after enough time, it'll figure things out. That doesn't mean it gets you productive to do what you need to do, because at the end of the day, it's not like it's going to write everything for you. It just needs to help you write it. And again, back to time, is it faster just to talk to your buddy, or is it faster to get ChatGPT to bang its head for 6 hours until it figures it out?
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. I think that's one of the, and just again, it's like there, our understanding of the world is continually expanding, and, on the edges of that understanding, that's where the specialties are. And so that's where you have to be aware of, are you truly on the edge here trying to do something that's relatively not well known? I remember even, asking ChatGPT to help me out with the OpenAI API, a year ago. It was pretty terrible, actually, which, again, it's not a crack on it. I mean, because they had limited the knowledge from 2021 or whatever that was. So it didn't even know its own APIs, which was kind of funny in a way, but perfectly understandable. But again, like that was all new, like how to chain and how to do streaming and all this other stuff was, relatively new. And it just didn't do a great job at answering those. So I was better off like going to websites.
Yep. I've run into some of those cases, or YouTube or something, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a ton of stuff out there. It's just finding the right person and kind of knowing, but it took me a little bit longer than I'm probably willing to admit that, maybe this isn't maybe I need to go find something else. I was banging my head on ChatGPT for a while to learn that. Like that. So interesting. Any other closing thoughts here? We're at 45. Any other thoughts?
I got just a couple little things, like contrarian things to think about on this. So for full stack teams, for people who embrace it as religion, like there's an honest question you have to answer yourself, or ask yourself and then answer. And is it really, you want everybody to do everything? Is that really what your goal is? Because if here's an example. So there's an overlap, but I think it's a misnomer. So if you're hiring a full stack person and that person has a bias towards the backend or data, like they're more of a data engineer, backend person, but they can do front end. Are they ever really going to be an expert at like CSS animations and pixel perfect Flexbox and scroll positioning and parallel effects and all those really, really fine grained things that you need to know about the browser and the CSS APIs and stuff? Are they really ever going to be good at that if what they really love and are good at is the data engineer side? Sure, they can go through and do all these things. And it's vice versa, is an expert in CSS. Knows everything about every single little, and I mean, some of the new stuff in CSS is mind blowing. Is he really going to spend nitty gritty amount of time on database optimizations across multiple regions and sharding techniques and things that backend people need to worry about? And even though that person, again, would probably say, I'd like to learn it, practically speaking, you're trying to build this thing as fast as possible or whatever. Are you going to give them enough time to be experts in that too? And then are they going to really enjoy it? And I think the answer is probably not, even though they could learn and they might want to do that. So my point is, I think with full stack, it's great. I love full stack. I'm a full stack person, like I said, but there is these overlapping specialties that people in full stack bring to the table. So when you're in a full stack product team, you still might have a guy that's like the data guy, even though you could probably do it too, or review his PRs.
Yeah.
That person's the go-to data person, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be like everybody has to fit this one mold of superhuman full stack person.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's I think that's a good kind of thing to close on, is when you're thinking about a team, is just play to your team, not to a theory or a concept, but who are the humans on your team? I think managers are often trained to think about people as functional, like Lego pieces. Well, there's a full stack, and we just put two full stacks together and we'll get this and it'll be great. But within that Lego piece is like Jane, who's really good at front end and has some experience building APIs and maybe a little bit on relational databases. And then you've got, Bill over here with the other Lego piece who's got a different set of skills. So are you really going to treat them as the same piece? Probably not.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And I think it's just, again, people want this myth of like Lego pieces tree, which again, that's a whole different other kind of management discussion topic. But I think these labels, create environments where that can happen. So, well, cool, man. We'll wrap up with that. Good discussion. Awesome. We got all over the place here. So, and again, we included AI in the conversation. So feel free to throw us a couple $1 million if you're a VC and you're listening. We promise to talk about it more.
Cool. All right.
All right, man. Have a great Florida day.
See you next time.
Talk soon.
Yeah.
Bye.